Hello, in between not doing my job by making these videos, I did my job, and I have two new papers out, and one is open access, so let's talk about that one first. This study is called Something's Gotta Go, and it is an investigation into discourse around men's VIO datsumo, which, if you're not familiar, datsumo being hair removal, and VIO being, well, the V, the I, and the O on, in this case, the male body. So this is probably one of the most weird studies I guess I've done, but it was a lot of fun. I was invited to do this with Mie Hiramoto, who is an amazing scholar. I've been citing her work throughout my master's and into PhD, etc. And a few years ago, I had a chance to meet her and eventually work with her on a study that I designed, which is also open access. And it's kind of an analysis of the show aggressive retsuko, whatever you want to call it. It went really well. We enjoyed working together. So she invited me onto this project. Her contribution is looking at advertising promoting a specific type of men's hair removal in Japan, which is known as kaigo datsumo, which is framed as removing the hair on your body so that you don't burden old age carers, the people that are going to take care of you if you go to like a nursing home, etc. From a kind of cynical perspective, these advertisements are trying to move into a new market because, the problem with permanent hair removal is that once someone's a customer once, they're kind of gone. So they're trying to move into gathering customers for men who have been hesitant to or uninterested in hair removal up to date. And in looking at these framings, Mie finds out that the advertisements often position troubles that come with aging as something that is inevitable and cannot be stopped, something that you will encounter. And then, kind of surprisingly, rather than trying to put out new kinds of masculinity or make men kind of comfortable or even encouraged to care about their body hair, etc., the main discourse that is used throughout these advertisements is one that kind of moves to a more traditional position, focusing on the idea that if men do not do this, they will be burdening others. And so you get the hair removed more not for yourself, but also to remove the burden from other people. There are, of course, advertisements saying that it will make your life easier, but this discourse of not burdening others is a major one in the advertisements, with the second largest one being one that asserts that women find it more attractive. And we can see this in like advertisements here. Whatever survey this is, obviously we don't know who it was done with or how accurate it is. But it posits that while there are some women who don't really care either way, there are no women in Japan at all, not even a single 1%, who actually prefer hairier men. And this actually surprisingly reminds me of something I saw when I was a kid. One of the first times I realized that kind of a lot of advertisements, the goal is just to make you feel bad about yourself to buy things. Because I remember seeing an ad that said 98% of women prefer men without excess body hair. And as a rather hirsute individual, that statement made me really sad as a teen. Until I thought about it for a second and realized that that just means that 2% of women don't know what excessive means, because even if you love body hair, excessive body hair is not good because it's a subjective matter and it always means more than necessary. But anyway, my contribution then was looking at responses to this discourse, and to do so I analyzed a discourse about men's hair removal and specifically men's kaigo datsumo on the very, very popular forum Girls Channel. Ideally, of course, we would have had a kind of men-centric forum, but I honestly just could not find men on the internet discussing this practice, certainly not enough to make useful data. Whereas on Girls Channel, we had a number of different threads discussing this, and to a huge extent. And unlike the survey that we saw, actually the data was split more or less 50-50 between people that wanted the men to maintain some level of body hair, if not a lot of body hair, and ones that thought it would be better if they did engage in datsumo practices. Interestingly though, just like how the advertisements kind of went into traditional dialogues rather than more modern ones, a lot of the anti-discourse was also rooted in traditional dialogues around Japanese masculinity, asserting that having some kind of body hair is necessary to have kind of a manly feel. Indeed, some of the critiques even asserted that men who engage in body hair removal are playboys, or in a more homophobic presentation, some of them were asserting that this is a sign that your boyfriend or your husband, etc., is gay. There were also people who viewed the entire thing as kind of a cynical plot, but what's really interesting here then is that we're not seeing like a progressive conservative or like embracing new masculinities, rejecting new masculinities clash here, but the clash is actually between two competing traditionalist dialogues around men's bodies and men's behavior. Within the pro camp though, while there were some people who definitely did embrace the idea that yeah, you do need to do this as you get older, some people even saying that they are a nurse and that they would find it beneficial, although there was counter discourse to this of people saying that when you're a nurse, whether or not there's body hair on the person is far from the biggest complaint that you have or the biggest trouble you have. And there were also women who said that, just they find it attractive when men are hairless. One of the biggest pro-hair removal discourses was from women who were very, very assertive and confident in discussing their sexual preferences and noting how the removal of hair made things easier for them in this light, including in engaging in various sexual activities. So while this forum broadly does have a very conservative approach to kind of men's grooming practices, etc., they also have a more progressive approach to embracing dialogue around female sexuality, which of course the advertisements themselves refused to acknowledge. Despite encouraging men to engage in a new practice, they noted that women might find it more attractive, but they refused to, for instance, use this kind of as a selling point, saying that, it would maybe reduce the burden on women in this way. in the bedroom rather than in the nursing home. And there were also some, interesting little individual data points, such as one person who wanted men to do this practice, so was very, very supportive of Kaigo Datsumo because she wanted men to experience the pain that women do, given how much hair removal that they're expected to do due to societal pressure. And, fine, pop off queen. Anyway, it was a really, really fun study. It's in the journal Cognitive Pragmatics, and again, it is open access, so you can just go there and have a read, and I hope you find it very, very interesting. I don't know if I'll ever do a study like this ever again, so it was fun to kind of move into this new space, do a lot of reading and stuff I'm not familiar with, such as the history of grooming practices, but also contribute to a special issue that this is part of, which has some other articles that are coming out slowly that you can read as well. The second one then is actually something I published a few months ago, but I've waited to talk about it because it is not an article, it is a chapter in this book, and I wanted to read the whole book so I could talk about it in general. My contribution here is sort of a summary of all the research I've done for almost a decade now on the Japanese writing system as a social practice, going back to kind of the history of Japanese writing through to the war period and the ideologies that were circulating then, into modern developments and how technology has influenced the way people use script to assert things about themselves, how they play with the Japanese writing system. A lot of the things I talk about in this chapter, to be honest, are things I've talked about in other publications, but I really wanted to focus on writing something that was very, very accessible here, and something that could be, taught in a Japanese class or a Japanese culture, Japanese language class, etc., as kind of a background reading that gives people a summary of the history without going too depth into like data, tables, analysis, etc. And I hope I've done that. I hope it's a good read. But the book itself is also great. I really, really enjoyed it. This was edited by a team of 3, but one of them is Patrick Heinrich there, who has written a number of very important studies, including The Making of Monolingual Japan, which is just a classic and really, really great book about the language diversity throughout Japan. It's over a decade old now, so I actually would love to see like a sequel or somebody do a project on what's happened since then, especially with developments in the internet, etc. But it still remains a really classic and important text. But the other authors you invited are also great. There are chapters about the language ideologies you find in Japanese teaching materials. There are chapters about language ideologies in intercultural relationships and, again, the classroom. Heinrich's own chapter about the Amayoko shopping district is really, really fascinating, looking at the various languages that are used throughout this kind of really diverse and multicultural area, where a lot of people, especially tourists, are not speaking the same languages, but the various vendors, etc., have learned a bit of this and that, mixing everything in order to pull people into their shops and create kind of a vibrant space. There's ones about video game dialogue, or just online Japanese discourse about correct and incorrect language use, translation, disability, Ainu language, Okinawan languages. It's just a really, really fun and diverse read, and I definitely recommend it. It's a great contribution by a number of emerging, mid-career, and established scholars. So get a copy or ask your university library to put a copy in if they don't have it, because it's a very, very fun read. Despite that these are academic studies, they are all very, very straightforward, and I think like any university student, etc., could read them without any problem. There is theory, etc., but it's not thick, it's not heavy. It's a very accessible book about very, very accessible topics at the end of the day. So thanks again for everyone for being interested in what I do in my research. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy these papers, these chapters, and I'll let you know when I publish other stuff soon. See you then.